Hi everybody and welcome to another YouTube video. We are out here in Pontefract today. Me and Dean are fitting this 11 kilowatt Alpha ESS battery storage system, but this one's a little bit different. There's no solar. So there's no solar on this house. The customer is going to grid charge this battery overnight on the, I believe it's the Octopus Go tariff. So it gets cheap electricity overnight for 4 hours. Is going to put that energy into a battery and then allow the battery to discharge that energy into the house during the day to reduce his daytime running. So this will be the first one that we've ever done like that. So it's going to be a really interesting case study. I'm going to take you through it. Let's go. So we're inside the garage. This is where everything's going. So you can see here, we've got our almost famous now fireboards on the wall. So we've got a full board here, then we've just cut this one to match the space that's available. This gives us heat protection. We don't necessarily need it for heat protection because it's going on a block wall, but it gives us a nice flat surface to mount everything. And if we were putting trunking on this wall, it makes it all nice and easy to screw isolators, trunking and everything to it. But for this, it's just ready for aesthetics. So you can see here we've got one of the 5.5 kilowatt hour modules for the Alpha. So we've sat that on the floor because they are quite heavy. You can wall mount them, but yeah, they are very heavy. So we like to try and get them on the floor if we can. That's going to fix through these brackets here, through the board, into the block wall, and basically just stop it from tipping forward more than anything. We then got a second one of these that sits on top. That takes us to 11 kilowatt hours usable capacity. We've then got on top of that, we've got the inverter. So the total height of the system is going to be about 1.8 meters tall. We've then got a bit of space right and left for a possible future module. If the customer wanted to take this up to say 16.5 kilowatt hours or 22 kilowatt hours, we've got a bit of space to play with. In this little area here, we're going to have our distribution board for the Alpha. So that's going to contain the protection. We've got an MCB, a 40 amp MCB. We've then got a 6 amp RCBO for the battery meter, and that battery meter will monitor the grid. Yeah, just keep the battery informed and put the information as to the customer's import onto the Alpha app as well. So it puts all the information onto the app. We're then going to have a little UPS board. So that's going to be a little 6-way board, and we're going to move some of the circuits in here onto that UPS board. What that'll do is, in the event of a power cut, the battery will then power those circuits from the energy that's stored in the battery. So the customer has identified a few circuits for us to remove and put into our UPS board, and I think that's going to be expanded over the next month or two. But certainly today we're looking at probably putting about 3 circuits onto that UPS board. We're then going to have an AC isolator just here as well, so that there's some local isolation for the battery. If this battery was in a room the other side of the house, we'd have to have one here and one next to the battery, but because we're right next to the main incoming supply and the connection point, we just need that one battery in there. So yeah, that's what we're cracking on with. We've got this hole here, because it's also tight here, I've drilled through here and popped out in this little corner, and that'll come into some trunking, so that actually when the system's finished, you won't see any cables, hopefully. So that's what we're on with, and yeah, we'll crack on. Right, so we're at the meter box now, so I'm going to show you in a minute where we've connected in and how we're going to position this CT clamp. So if we come and have a little zoom in on here, we haven't made any of this live as yet. But we've got a main isolator, so we're going to turn all this off, make it all safe, and then we're going to take these tails out, put them into these 2 Henley blocks here. We've got our tails here that are going into our Alpha distribution board, and then we're just going to put some links back in just to power everything. So these are going to come into here, then some links back to repower the house board, and it'll also power our Alpha DB board. And then we've got a CT clamp, so that is going to go onto either this cable here or the cable coming out the top of here, whatever we sort of find easiest to clip it on. And this little clamp is what is reading all the information about if power's been imported, exported. Obviously on this job we're not installing solar, so there's not going to be any export, but if the customer did decide to add solar in the future, this is the clamp that would log that exported power. But for the time being, this is just going to register the import, and that puts onto the Alpha dashboard all the information about how much energy the house has used today, yesterday, this month, this year, last year. So that little device is very important, and that's going to go onto one of these cables just in here. As well as installing all of this in here, we've got to install an earth rod as well. And we've had an absolute nightmare sighting this earth rod, to be quite honest. But we've found a position now, and yeah, I'll show you where that is. Right, so like I mentioned, we had a bit of a nightmare sighting the earth rod. We tried 3 different locations, but we finally found a good position to get a decent earth reading with the earth rod. So you can see here, we've got it just down. So we've driven it in here, and we did a test to make sure we had a good connection and a good reading. So we've ran some 10mm earth, and we're going to clip that on the underside of the fence to keep it out of sight. And we've got some conduit taking it back into the building and back into the garage, and then we're going to take it through the garage and up into that UPS DB, and that is going to provide the battery and those UPS circuits with an earth connection in the event of a grid failure. Because what the battery will do is, if it senses that it's lost grid, it will disconnect line, neutral and earth that it has coming in from the grid. That will then mean it's relying on its batteries to power those circuits and this rod to provide an earth for those circuits that are on that UPS. Right, so that's the install done. It's all up and running. So I'm going to give you one last walkthrough of what everything is, how everything works, and yeah, give you a little idea as to what we've installed. So this is the star of the show. We've got the 11 kWh Alpha Smile 5, bit of a tongue twister, all here stacked up. So if we wanted to ever add more modules, there's space on this right hand side to add more capacity. 5.5 kWh usable capacity in each one of these, so it's 11 kWh in total. We've then got a discharge rate of 4.6 kilowatts, so it can drag out of this system or push into this system 4.6 kilowatts at any one time. We've got DNO approval for all of that, so that's all sorted and working well. If we then move over to this side, we can see here there's the customer's existing Hager distribution board, and then we've added these 2 separate Luden distribution boards. So we have a look in these now. We've got our circuit for our Alpha battery and our circuit for the grid meter. So this little grid meter is monitoring what's happening with the mains. So there's obviously not going to be any export on this property because there's no solar. So we're just monitoring import really through this meter. That meter feeds into the Alpha and gives the Alpha all the information, and then the Alpha puts all that on the app as well. So that's all that part. Just below that, we've then got an isolator. So this isolator here is just a local isolation, so we can turn off the battery and cut the AC supply to the battery if we need to isolate it to work on any of this equipment, or if we need to reset the system. We've then got this Alpha backup distribution board. This is a distribution board that we have installed, and we've moved some of the circuits from the existing Hager board into here. So in the event of a power cut, this distribution board will remain live because this is being fed through the battery. So all of these circuits continue to have supply until the battery has depleted all of its energy. If we want to add any more to that, we can do. The only thing we have to be careful with is we can't load that up more than 4.6 kilowatts. So if we can't put things like EV chargers on it, you know, cookers, things that are going to use more than that at peak, or certainly all the circuits added together, you can't overload that, otherwise the battery will just trip out and you won't have any power to these either in the event of a power cut. So then we've got this conduit just here that goes to an earth rod outside so that the system can still have an earth connection in the event of a power cut, which is always handy. And that's pretty much everything apart from our document holder just here. So in here we've got our schematic drawing as to what everything is and how it all connects in. We've got our start-stop procedure so that the customer or another electrician can isolate this system and make sure that they're safe whilst working. We've got the system manual in there, keeps it all in one place and keeps it all nice and tidy. So let's have a look at the Alpha app. This app's actually recently just been updated, so it's got a fresh new look, and I think it looks really good compared to the old one, which I did like as well. But let's have a little look through the app. We've got this My System page here. So obviously with this system, we haven't got any solar at the minute, so solar PV power is going to be at 0. We've then got what the battery status is, so it's discharging and it's got 72.4% in it at the minute. So if we press on that area. We've got this really nice new graphic here now, which shows the solar panels on the roof, which we don't have. And then we've got the battery in the middle here, and we can see that the energy lines here are going into the house. The load going into the house is 608 watts. So the battery is effectively discharging 608 watts. We can see there's a little bit of interference of 4 watts going back to the grid, but that'll correct itself shortly. The battery's got to react to changing loads in the house, and if solar was on as well, it would have to react to changing light levels. So sometimes you can get a little bit of leakage, if you like, back to the grid, but only very minimal amounts. So you can see that's updating about every 10 seconds. If we scroll down, you can see here then we've got another status symbol here saying that the battery is discharging, and it's got 72.4% stored energy within it. So that stored energy is what it's charged up with overnight, which we'll be able to see on the graphic in a minute, and is now pushing that power into the house. All this power that is going into the house is costing the customer 5p, which is how much they've paid. So if we go down, so some of these won't be relevant. So self-consumption won't really have anything in there until the customer gets solar. But this side, we can see that everything will always just match, because the battery will always just give all of its power to the house. There won't be any sort of solar backing that up. So some of these really won't be relevant until there's a solar PV system, if they ever decide to get one. So if we go back home, we've then got profit page. So this page is where you can input the amount that the system cost you, which in this case was £7,500, and then your tariff amount. So you can put the nighttime rate and the daytime rate, and then it can give you that profit by using that nighttime rate to power the house. So at the minute, the difference between the day and the night is only 10 pence, but as tariffs change, the gap is going to widen. So per day, that profit is going to go up. So if we click, say on the 16, that profit is 70p. But like I say, there's not a huge amount of difference between the tariffs at the minute. But we can see that changes throughout, but it's all around sort of 50 to 80p. We can then change that to month, year. So you can see so far in 2022 it's saved 23 quid, but it's not been installed that long. If we then move on to power, we can see here this is today's graph. So we can remove information from this graph by pressing on the buttons here. So we can remove PV and feed in, because they're not relevant to this job because there's no solar. So all the ones we can see here now are relevant. So we've got, if I just remove everything apart from grid consumption, this is the energy that this property has purchased today from the grid. So you can see here that it's finishing at around sort of 4:30, something like that on this graph. You can get this on your desktop as well, which can be even more accurate, and put your mouse across the graph and it'll give you the timestamps and everything. But if we then put our battery over that, you can see here that the big consumption has been during this low tariff period, and that has meant that the battery, if we remove the grid consumption, the battery has taken this really steep rise in charge all the way up to 100%. So that battery is now 100% charged, and then we can see throughout the course of today it's steadily going down until it hits around 0%, and that is then powering this house. So if we add in the house loads, this is what the house has consumed, be it from the battery or purchased from the grid. This is what the house has used here. So you can see all of this is within this green section. So all of that has been provided for by the battery. So there's not been any grid consumption outside of the low tariff hours, which is great. So we can add all of that back in, and that'll overlay all that information. So if we have a look at a different day, so you can see yesterday, if we remove everything apart from the battery, you can see got to 100%, and then it's taken this steady drop during the day. And then at around 6 o'clock, probably when the oven went on or something like that, it's then taken a heavy drop as there's been a lot of load. So if we add in that load there, you can see there we've got really high spikes. So then the battery's kicked in and pushed all that power out the most it could. And then that has continued down all the way down towards 0%. So it's basically discharged all that cheap energy during the day. The grid consumption, it's all been at this time of day, so in the morning time, again, so the battery's provided pretty much everything that this home needs during the day without having to purchase any energy from the 15 pence in this case so far, daytime rate. So everything's been at 5p. So we can see the load there has all been satisfied, and then we get towards the end of the day when around midnight, the low tariff period kicks in again. Another look at a different day. So you can see here there has been a little bit of grid consumption towards the end of the day. And if we take off everything apart from the battery, we can see actually the battery drained even quicker today on this day, which was the 17th. It actually had pretty much completely emptied by 9 o'clock. So there was a lot going on this day, and so that's meant a little bit of grid consumption has had to be purchased towards the end of the day, but that's inevitable. There's always going to be those days that are really high using. The main thing is that all of this load here has been satisfied by the battery, so the bulk of it has been satisfied, which is good. So that is the graph. Obviously, if you had solar, you could also see the solar generation and the feedback to the grid and all the rest of it, but as an app goes, I think that's a really, really clear and in-depth app that gives you all the information right there, which is really cool. Right, let's talk about how a system that has no solar, battery only, charging up from cheap electricity overnight, discharging that energy during the day, during a high tariff period, pays for itself. So we get so many questions on all of our social media platforms about how much that system cost, how long does it take to pay itself off, and you know what, we're going to address some of that now and go through it. So this system with the UPS and everything costs £7,500 including the VAT. There's obviously elements of that cost that have nothing to do with the battery sort of saving the home money. So the UPS side could be classed as a separate cost and could come off the workings out that we're going to do today. However, to make it simple, we've just included it all. So the system cost of £7,500 is what we're going to break down. For this little section, we're going to need a blackboard. There we go. So let's go through this system as it is. So currently this customer is on 15p during the day. His nighttime rate is 5p, and so his system cost is £7,500, like we've mentioned. So this system will charge up with 11 kilowatt hours overnight. So if we do 11 times the 5p rate, which is the nighttime rate, that comes to a total charging cost of 55p. So 11 times 5p equals 55p. So that is effectively what it's costing this customer currently to charge this battery up. That energy is then discharged during the day when the customer is being charged 15p. So if we didn't have this battery, it would be 15p times 11 kilowatt hours, and that would be £1.65. So if the customer didn't have this battery, the 11 kilowatt hours that this holds would cost £1.65, and with having this battery it costs 55p. So that's a saving per day of £1.10. To make all this a lot easier to follow, we can work out the savings by the difference in the day and the night rate. So the difference at the minute is 10p. So if we do 10p times 11 kilowatt hours, that gets us £1.10. So that's our saving. So we can forget the daytime rate and the nighttime rate now. We've got a saving of £1.10 per day. So if we do £1.10 times 365 days a year, that gets us a yearly saving of £401.50 per year. We then take the £7,500 total install cost figure and divide that by the annual saving. That'll give us our years. So 7,500 divided by £401.50, that gets us an 18.67 year payback break even, which isn't that great. However, we're not on 15p for very long. So if we apply the same information to what the customer is going on to in August, his daytime rate is going up from 15p to 33.96p, and his nighttime rate is jumping from 5p to 7.5p. So that is a difference of 26.46p between the day and the night rate. So if we apply that and we go, okay, 26.46p times 11 kilowatt hours, that gets us a saving of £2.91 per day. That £2.91 times 365 days a year, that gets us now a yearly saving of £1,062.15. So if we divide that by the system cost, that gets us just over a 7-year payback. So then we've suddenly come from 18 years all the way down to 7 years. Now, energy prices are rumoured to be going up about 32% after October. So that, if we work out what the customer's going to be on after August, when his tariff drops, is actually probably going to be around 44 pence, 44.82p during the day and 9.9p during the night. And that's a 32% rise. So the difference now between those two rates is 34.92p. So if we do 34.92 pence, times that by 11 kilowatt hours, that's a daily saving of £3.85. So then £3.85 times 365 days a year is £1,405.25. Divide that by 7,500 and we've got a break-even year of just over 5 years. So we've come from over 18 years down to 5 years just through the energy price rises that we're going to see over this year. What happens after that, who knows? So hopefully that clears up how this system is going to pay for itself. There is some assumptions we've made in that, is that this system will fully discharge during the day, which, as we've looked back over this timeline that this system's been in, it pretty much every single day will discharge fully. So we know that 11 kilowatt hours will charge up in the 4-hour period. So that's easy enough. It charges up in about 2 hours. So we know it's always going to store 11 kilowatt hours overnight. And from looking back over the system for the past few months, it pretty much 9.5 times out of 10 will always discharge the full 11 kilowatt hours. So that's what we've assumed within these calculations. So we've gone from, like I've mentioned, 18.67 years payback, which it would be now if the energy prices didn't change, to what they're predicted to go up to of a 5.3 year payback. So that is an unbelievable turnaround. The inverter is warranted for 5 years, the batteries are for 10 years. So worst case scenario, you have to change this inverter after 5 years. You've still got another 5 years before any of these need changing. So for me, that makes complete sense to get a battery only system. So if you're thinking of having a system, the Alpha is a perfect example, because like this customer is considering, is thinking of adding solar into this, and we can just plug some solar PV into this system and increase the length of time that this system will be able to last with its battery capacity, and reduce the amount of cost overnight that this system has to charge it with. Because at the minute we're charging up with 11 kilowatt hours and discharging 11. If we can top this system up so that it doesn't have to charge up with that full 11 overnight, then it only makes this equation even better. So hopefully that's cleared things up. If you've got any questions about any of this, leave them in the comments. That is pretty much the Alpha explained. There's not a lot to it really. It's there to work automatically in the background, and with you looking at the app, you're not controlling anything really. You are just looking at how much money it's saving you, which is kind of like a perfect situation really. So that is the Alpha Smile 5 installed and up and running. Okay, so let's have a chat about the UPS system on this. So UPS is uninterruptible power supply or power source, and that is our battery. Our battery is going to supply power to the circuits that we've removed from the house distribution board and put into our backup distribution board. So in the event of a power cut, those circuits can continue to receive power from this battery. So the battery has a minimum state of charge of 20%, and that's like a retention amount. So it will retain 20% in its battery cells, so that if there is a power cut, it can supply that 20% as a minimum to that backup distribution board. If there's a power cut and this is 80% charged, then it's got 80% in. So that state of charge, minimum state of charge, is just the worst case scenario. You can change that as well. If you don't quite want 20%, you can drop it down. But what we're going to do is we're going to test this UPS mode. So we're going to turn the battery supply off and then turn the main house distribution board off. So if you guys want to go right the way back, you should be able to see these lights. So keep your eyes on these lights. It's really quick and you'll see the lights flicker ever so slightly. So we're going to turn the battery off now, and that will swap the circuits from getting grid power to getting battery power. So 3, 2, 1. There we go. So lights still on, which is good. So we're going to now turn the main fuse board off, just to prove that there's nothing coming into this property that could cause these lights to still be on. There we go. So there's no power in this property at all now, apart from those circuits that we've installed in our backup distribution board. So you might have seen it, you might not, the lights flickered ever so slightly. So I'm going to turn the battery back on now and see if you can catch the flicker again. It'll be so quick. So I'm going to turn that battery back on. So it doesn't do it straight away. It checks that the voltage is okay and everything's okay for it to start up again, and then it will click and it will change these lights over back onto grid power in a couple of seconds. So we're still in UPS mode at the minute, and it's thinking about it. Keep your eye on it. Keep your eye on it. Don't miss it. There we go. That's it. The flicker just happened then. So this is now back into grid mode, and the lights are now running back on normal grid power. The battery's gone back into a normal state. It's actually starting back up now. And so I'm going to turn the main house back on. So then we're back to normal. So that is the UPS mode in a nutshell, but you can see that Wi-Fi routers, heating time clocks, things like that, the changeover is so quick that they won't even lose their times, and that is just such a benefit. And this customer can be sat smugly watching Coronation Street in his living room whilst everyone else is in the dark panicking about what's happening. So yeah, a bit sadistic that, isn't it? But anyway, that is the UPS mode all done and dusted. So that's the 11 kilowatt hour Alpha all installed, no solar, just relying on that charge and discharge from the cheap electricity at night and giving that cheap electricity to the property during the day. Hopefully you can see that the payback works, and with prices only going in one direction, a system like this is only going to pay itself off quicker and quicker. We might be back to this job. The customer's now interested in looking at solar as well. So with this system, we will be able to put solar directly into the Alpha. So we're going to explore that over the coming months. But on its own, I feel like the equations all stack up for just getting a battery-only system, especially if you can take advantage of the overnight rates. So, hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe, like, share, all that other stuff, and we'll catch you in the next video.